You didn't seek closure. You became the ending. That's what they never expected. That's what hurt the most. See, people like them, they think you're supposed to wait around for explanations, for apologies, for soft little "I'm sorry" notes scribbled in guilt. But nah, you walked out mid-scene. No dramatic goodbyes. No open wounds to keep bleeding. You slammed the door and left the script burning behind you. That's not weakness. That's power. That's evolution. They wanted a reaction, right? They wanted you broken, crawling, desperate for some kind of emotional answer to wrap things up nicely, but you gave them nothing. No shout, no scream, just silence. And silence? Oh, silence is hell to the guilty. It's not an absence. It's a message written in fire across the walls of their mind. You didn't go silent because you didn't care. You went silent because you cared too damn much, for too damn long, until you realized you were the only one bleeding in that war. And something in you snapped, didn't it? Let me guess. You gave them patience, loyalty, truth, things people beg for, things they pretend to want. But when you handed them realness, they fumbled it like it was poison. Because realness comes with expectations, with commitment, with weight, and they were feather-light liars drifting from one emotional thrill to the next, addicted to the chaos of almosts and maybes. But you were solid. You were present. You were the damn foundation. And they tried to dance on top of that like it was a stage. Foolish. So what happened? You woke up. That's what. You stopped asking why. You stopped begging the mirror to explain your pain. You stopped answering texts with shaking hands and hoping the next message would fix everything. You stopped needing closure because you realized something brutal. Some people destroy and never look back. And that's when you stopped looking back too. And now they whisper about you. Now they tell stories with half-truths and shaky voices, because they didn't think you'd make it without them, because they thought you'd fall apart in their absence. But all that happened was, you rebuilt, quietly, coldly, relentlessly. You didn't heal with hugs and happy endings. You hardened. You took the wound, stitched it shut with your own damn hands, and walked out of that mess with a spine made of steel and eyes that don't flinch anymore. See, the joke here is that you were never the villain. You were the fire alarm they kept snoozing, the warning they ignored, the storm they laughed at, until it came knocking. And now, you are the ending. Not just a chapter, not a comma, a damn full stop. You became what they fear the most. Someone who doesn't chase, someone who doesn't explain, someone who ends things without looking back for applause. You want to know what makes you dangerous now? You stopped needing their version of truth. You stopped depending on their apologies to breathe. You became a world of your own, a truth no one can twist. You don't show up to prove anything anymore. You let your absence speak. And oh, does it speak loud. It screams in silence. It haunts in shadows. Because when you walked away, you didn't just leave a void. You left a mirror. One that forces them to face who they really are, without your light to hide behind. You're not heartless. That's what they'll say. They'll call you cold, distant, changed. But don't you ever forget, they made you choose between your peace and their chaos. And you chose peace. You chose sanity. You chose life without constant emotional warfare. And that choice, that's what scares them. That's why they act confused now. That's why they throw shade behind your back. Because they know, deep down, you were the only one who ever meant it. And they lost you. No, you didn't seek closure. You didn't beg them to explain why they lied, why they disappeared, why they chose everyone but you. You just watched as they stumbled over their guilt, watched as their new options failed to give them the loyalty you once did, watched as they tried to recreate the energy you brought so naturally, only to fall flat every single time. You didn't scream, you didn't rant, you just became the ending. And let me tell you something, they'll feel that forever. Not because you hurt them, but because you gave them everything, and they still couldn't hold it. And when they realize they can't find that level of loyalty, that depth, that realness, ever again, that's when it hits. That's when the silence becomes deafening. So now, don't go back. Don't check on them. Don't try to rewrite a story that was already finished. You're not who you were back then. That version of you died the moment you stopped seeking closure. That version begged for clarity. This version closes the damn book. They'll try to rewrite history. You know that, right? Twist the story. Make you look like the villain. Because that's easier than admitting they had a real one and couldn't handle it. They'll tell people you changed, that you became cold, that you stopped caring. But the truth is, you stopped tolerating. There's a difference, a huge one. See, people love the version of you that breaks their back to keep others warm. They romanticize the self-sacrifice until you stop bleeding for them. And when that happens, they panic. They panic because now they're faced with the version of you that doesn't need their chaos. The version that sees through the lies. The version that doesn't dance to the same old game. That version, it's not soft, it's not smiling, it's watching in silence. And that silence, it exposes everything. You didn't need closure because you finally understood that closure from liars is just another lie dressed up in sentimental words. They don't want to fix things. They want to feel better about themselves. They want to hand you a half-assed apology so they can sleep at night while you stay up replaying the past. That's not healing. That's manipulation. You dodged that. You outgrew it. You outlived it. And don't you ever feel guilty for that. Because you weren't supposed to shrink yourself into someone's idea of forgiveness just to give them peace. You earned your peace alone, through nights of overthinking, through breakdowns nobody saw, through rebuilding yourself brick by brick without anyone clapping for you. And that makes you unstoppable. They'll pretend they don't miss you. They'll pretend they're fine, that life got better, that they're healing too. But deep down, they know. They know they had something rare, something sacred, someone who understood them in ways they never even understood themselves. Someone who didn't walk away when it got hard. Someone who held on through every storm until you didn't. Until you finally saw that loyalty without reciprocation is slavery. That love without respect is torment. And that forgiveness without change is just self-destruction in disguise. That's when you let go. Not to punish them, not to play games, but to survive, to save the little of yourself that was still untouched by their damage. You want to know what makes your silence so loud now? It's because it echoes with everything they took for granted. Your support, your time, your energy, your late night check-ins, your patience, that emotional armor you wore for two. They don't get that anymore, and they feel it, even if they act like they don't. Even if they post fake smiles and pretend their new distractions are healing. They know they can't recreate your presence. You were home, not a hotel. You were real, not a placeholder. And realness, it doesn't expire. It haunts. It lingers. It leaves a mark so deep that no substitute can erase it. And that's why you didn't need a goodbye. Because your absence became your loudest goodbye. It wasn't a moment. It was a transformation. You didn't just walk away. You evolved. And they hate that. They hate that you didn't crash without them. That you didn't go on a downward spiral begging for answers. That you didn't turn into a wreck. You went quiet. You went distant. You went stronger. And that strength, it's the biggest revenge. Because it shows you never needed them to begin with. You chose them, and they still lost you. It's a hard pill to swallow, isn't it? That someone could give you everything, and then disappear without a word. That someone could be so soft, so patient, so devoted, and then turn into a ghost. But here's what they don't understand. You didn't change overnight. You didn't switch up for no reason. You were screaming inside for months. You were begging for effort, for clarity, for just one damn sign that you mattered. And all you got was confusion, distance, excuses. So you stopped talking and started listening to your pain, to your worth, to the reality you were ignoring just to stay hopeful. And when you finally listened, you knew. You knew the only closure you'd ever get was walking away without a single word. And they'll never admit it, but your silence hurts more than any confrontation ever could. Because it means they don't get a chance to defend themselves. It means they don't get to spin the narrative. It means they don't get you anymore. Not your time, not your forgiveness, not your explanations, nothing. And when someone who once had access to your soul suddenly finds themselves locked out forever, that's not just loss, that's punishment. Silent, cold, final. They don't tell you how painful it is to outgrow someone you once prayed would never leave. They don't warn you about the ache that comes when you realize the person you fought for the hardest was never even in the fight. That they were just standing there letting you bleed out your loyalty, your time, your heart, while they measured how much of you they could use before you noticed. And when you finally did, when you finally stepped back and saw the mess for what it was, they called you the problem. That's the real slap in the face. Not the betrayal, not the lies, not the disrespect number. It's the inversion of the truth, the rewriting of the story where they become the victim. And you become the villain for finally choosing yourself. But that's the beauty of becoming the ending. You stop explaining. You stop proving. You stop justifying your reactions to people who kept triggering you and acting surprised by the fallout. You become untouchable. And let me tell you something about being untouchable. It ain't about being cold or cruel or emotionless. It's about knowing what you bring to the table and never again inviting people who only came to eat and never stayed to clean. It's about boundaries that feel like barbed wire to those who once walked all over you. And that discomfort they feel now, that's justice. That's balance being restored. That's the sound of their entitlement dying slowly in the absence of your presence. See, people always think they've got forever, that you'll always be there, always answering, always soft, always forgiving, until one day you switch the light off and walk out. And that silence, that permanent, icy, never coming back silence, it's a storm they can't run from. Because every time they try to reach you now, they don't find the same soul. They don't hear the same voice. They don't see the same eyes. You're there, maybe, but not there. You're present, but your energy, gone. Your love, gone. Your softness, gone. You didn't leave them. You just took yourself back. And the version of you they get now, distant, unavailable, untouchable. You didn't seek closure because you finally realized something people spend years avoiding. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you build out of ashes, out of silence, out of lessons you never asked to learn, but were forced to swallow. You looked around one day and saw the broken pieces and thought, this is it. This is what I get. And instead of waiting for someone to come and fix it, you swept the pieces yourself, burned what you had to, and walked out without looking back. And now, you're not waiting at the door. You're not sitting in that emotional waiting room hoping they'll finally grow up and do right. You're gone. And that absence, that's the ghost that lives in their shadow now. You think they're okay. You think they're thriving? You think they moved on? Please. People can't move on from real. Real isn't replaced. It's remembered daily. It shows up in their new conversations, in their awkward silences, in the way they smile without depth. You're the echo in their happy moments, the standard they try to ignore, the shadow in their peace. Because no matter how far they run, they know they fumbled something that don't come twice. They know the love you gave was rare, unrepeatable, real. And that knowledge, that's what eats them alive. Not your silence, not your distance, but the realization that they were loved by someone real and couldn't keep it. So don't go back. Don't check on them. Don't second guess your silence. You weren't heartless. You were heartbroken. There's a difference. You weren't cold. You were exhausted. You didn't give up. You just gave enough. Too much, maybe. And they fed off of it until there was nothing left to take. And when you finally went empty, they looked around like you were the one who changed. But the truth is, they just never expected you to leave. They thought their lack of effort would keep you begging, that your loyalty was permanent. But loyalty without respect, that's slavery. That's slow death. And you chose to live, to rebuild, to rise, alone if necessary. Because you didn't need closure. You became the ending they never saw coming. You know what's crazy? They'll still tell people they cared. They'll stand in rooms you're no longer in and say, I really did love them. Like love was ever just a word. Like it wasn't your actions screaming in silence. Like it wasn't your late night sacrifices, your constant understanding, your unshakable loyalty. They'll paint you like a ghost that disappeared, not the warrior who stayed long after you should have left. And the people who hear their stories, they'll nod, unaware they're listening to the edited version. The one where your patience is erased, your pain rewritten, your side untold. That's the curse of being the real one. You never get the final word. You are the final word. And even in silence, you leave them with chapters they can't forget. But that's the part they'll never say out loud, that you were the one who would have stayed forever if only they knew how to handle forever. You weren't difficult. You weren't traumatic. You were just real. And people who live in lies, they can't stand real. Real exposes them. Real forces growth. Real demands they look in the mirror and face the parts of themselves they keep burying. You were that mirror. You were the one who showed up with nothing but your soul in your hands and said, "Here, I'm yours if you can carry this with care." But they dropped it again and again. And every time you picked it back up, convincing yourself maybe this time would be different. Maybe they just needed time. Maybe they just didn't know how to love properly. But one day, you ran out of maybes. And on that day, you became the ending. Let me tell you what they feel now, but won't admit. Emptiness, regret, confusion. A constant gnawing at the back of their mind that whispers, you lost someone who actually gave a damn. It shows up in the way they stalk your silence, in the way they compare everyone new to the memory of you, in the way they flinch when your name comes up. Because that's the power of walking away without noise. You leave behind a presence so loud, it drowns out everything they try to replace it with. They can laugh, smile, move on, but deep down, they know they had someone who would have gone to war for them. And instead of building with you, they broke you. And that loss, that's on them. And you didn't just walk away, you evolved. You learned to pour into yourself the way you used to pour into them. You learned that survival isn't selfish, it's necessary. You stopped asking people to love you correctly and started loving yourself the way they couldn't. That's not weakness. That's transformation. That's stepping out of the fire they left you in and realizing you didn't burn, you forged. You became stronger, sharper, colder maybe, but never cruel. You just stopped offering warmth to hands that kept setting you on fire. So when they come back, and they will come back, don't open the door. Don't revisit the battlefield just because they suddenly remembered your worth. That's not love. That's ego. That's them realizing nobody out there is you. That's them realizing attention isn't the same as affection, and attraction isn't the same as loyalty. But it's too late. You're not the same. You're not waiting anymore. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed to be chosen by people who never chose you fully. And maybe it still hurts. Maybe some nights you replay the way it ended and wonder if you were too harsh, too distant, too silent. But no, you weren't. You were finally fair to yourself. You were finally tired of bleeding for someone who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You didn't become cold. You became awake, aware, wise. And that awareness, that's your freedom. You know now that peace is better than closure, that silence is louder than begging, and that the best revenge is building a life so solid, so calm, so untouchable. They can feel your absence like a scream in the dark. So don't second guess the ending. Don't look back. Don't romanticize the wreckage. You gave it all. You stayed long enough to be sure. You prayed for a sign, and the silence you got, that was your answer. And now you are the ending. Not because you wanted to be, but because they gave you no other choice. And they'll never forget it. Not because of what you said, but because of what you never had to say again. They'll never tell the truth, not the whole truth, because if they did, they'd have to admit they were the ones who made you cold, that you didn't show up to hurt them, you showed up to heal them, that your love wasn't loud or pretty, or wrapped in glitter. It was raw. It was honest. It was real. You weren't there to play games. You were there to build, to grow, to anchor, and they weren't ready for that. So instead of rising with you, they ran. Or worse, they stayed and destroyed you from the inside. Not with fists or screams, but with neglect, silence, half-effort, emotional absence. And people like that, they'll never say, "I couldn't handle being loved right." Number, they'll twist it. Say you were too much, too intense, too serious. But what they really mean is, you required accountability, and accountability scares cowards. But let's be honest, you saw the red flags, you felt the shifts, the delayed replies, the shorter calls, the empty "I love yous," and still, you gave, you stayed. You thought maybe you could fix it. Maybe if you were more patient, more forgiving, more quiet about your pain. You lowered your standards and silenced your needs, hoping that love alone would be enough to make them change. But love without respect is just punishment in slow motion. And you were dying inside while they got comfortable. Comfortable knowing you wouldn't leave. Comfortable knowing you'd always answer. Comfortable knowing you'd break your own heart before you ever risked breaking theirs. And then, one day, something in you broke for good. It wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was subtle, quiet, but final. You stopped begging for effort. You stopped explaining why you were hurt. You stopped trying to remind them of your worth. You just shut down. Not because you didn't care, but because you cared so much, and it was killing you. That's what they don't understand. That silence wasn't passive. It was surgical. It was you choosing your sanity over their chaos, your peace over their drama, your survival over their convenience. And in that silence, you found yourself again. Not all at once, not overnight, but piece by broken piece. And every piece you picked up taught you something. Taught you where you gave too much, where you stayed too long, where you mistook potential for reality. And the truth is, they didn't just lose a person, they lost a future. One filled with loyalty, depth, love they'll never find again. And you didn't just lose a partner, you lost illusions. You lost lies. You lost the belief that love means pain. And that loss, that's freedom. Now they look back, maybe not openly, maybe not with words, but they do, in their quiet moments, in their sleepless nights, in the eyes of people who never quite measure up. They look back and remember your energy, your presence, the way you saw them, the way you still chose them, even when they gave you every reason not to. And they remember how you walked away without a scene, without a breakdown, just distance, just silence, just peace. And that peace, it shouts louder than any closure they could ever fabricate. But don't ever go back. not even in thought, because the version of you they knew is gone. That version loved blindly, trusted deeply, gave endlessly. That version believed in people who didn't even believe in themselves. And now you move with caution, with clarity, with standards. And they call it coldness, but it's not. It's protection. You don't love less, you love wiser. You don't trust less, you trust smarter. You're not bitter. You're just no longer available for people who only know how to take. You didn't become the ending out of spite. You became it out of necessity. Because if you didn't end it, it would have ended you. And even now, when the memories hit, when the weight creeps back in, when the questions try to resurface, you remind yourself you didn't walk away from love. You walked away from abandonment dressed like love, from games, from patterns, from people who didn't know how to handle the very thing they begged for. And that reminder, that's what keeps you standing. So no, you didn't seek closure. You became it. And the ones who let you slip will spend years trying to find that kind of loyalty again, only to realize you weren't just a person. You were a lesson, a rare one, a painful one, and a final one. And even if they laugh now, even if they mock your silence, pretend like they've leveled up, post those fake smiles online to convince the world they're unfazed, you and I both know the truth. That kind of performance, it's not peace. It's panic in disguise. Because the loudest liars are always the ones trying to prove they've healed the fastest. But real healing, it's quiet, it's brutal, it's long, and most of all, it's honest. And they never had the strength for that kind of honesty. Because to heal from losing you, they'd have to admit what they did. They'd have to sit alone and face the reflection that says, I had someone solid, and I destroyed them anyway. But they won't do that. Cowards never do. So instead, they chase distractions. They run into arms that don't challenge them. They seek comfort in shallowness, because shallow love doesn't ask them to grow, doesn't reflect their damage, doesn't demand transformation. But deep down, they're still haunted by you, because you weren't noise. You were depth. You weren't attention. You were presence. And there's a difference, one that most people don't learn until it's too late. See, attention fades. Pretty faces get old. Temporary affection cracks under pressure. But the way you made them feel, the security, the understanding, the intensity of being seen by you, that sticks, that stains, that never lets go. And maybe sometimes you still feel that sting too. The nights when you miss what you thought it could have been. When you replay the moments, wondering if maybe you gave up too soon. But here's the thing. You didn't give up. You held on far longer than you should have. You gave more chances than anyone with self-respect ever would. You believed in them harder than they believed in themselves. And still, they failed you. Still, they chose comfort over growth, lies over truth, ego over connection. That's not your failure, that's their wound, one they'll carry forever, whether they admit it or not. Because the love you gave wasn't a product of the moment. It was built over time, carefully, painfully, authentically. And they'll never find that in a fast hookup. Never feel that depth in a surface level fling. What you gave them was earned, and now that they've lost it, they're slowly realizing that some people don't come back. That sometimes, when you break someone enough times, they don't scream. They disappear. Quietly, calmly, completely. And what's scarier than someone walking away? Someone walking away without needing closure, because that means the story is over. The window's shut, and no apology will ever unlock it again. You became the ending not to punish them, but to protect yourself, because you were drowning in the silence of their inconsistency. You were screaming in your own head, begging for something real, something honest, something safe. And they couldn't give that, not because you weren't worthy, but because they weren't ready, and maybe they never will be. And that's a painful truth to swallow, because you wanted them to be. You saw the potential, you saw the light buried under all that emotional immaturity, but at some point you realized potential doesn't equal promise. And loving someone's potential while they destroy your reality, that's not love, that's self-betrayal. And you've already sacrificed enough. So if you still wonder if they ever think about you, let me give you the cold truth. Yes, but not in the way you used to think, not with joy, not with fondness, but with regret, with that sickening ache of knowing they were given something pure and they dropped it, they ignored it, and now they look for it in people who don't even come close. And that's the lesson they'll live with. You were the one who would have stayed forever if only they hadn't treated you like you were temporary. You didn't heal with words. You healed with distance. You didn't need an explanation. You became the explanation. Your absence said it all. Your growth shouted louder than any revenge ever could. And now, every version of you that rises from this, every upgrade, every success, every moment of peace they no longer have access to, that's the ending they earned. And it's one they'll never rewrite. And here's the part that cuts the deepest for them. You didn't even make a scene. You didn't throw their lies in their face. You didn't post cryptic messages online. You didn't beg them to stay or cry to mutual friends hoping they'd come around. You just went quiet. And that silence, that's louder than any scream could have ever been, because it forces them to sit with it, with what they did, with what they lost, with what you were. Because now, everywhere they go, your energy haunts the space. They hear your name in songs, see your traits in strangers. They notice your presence most in the absence of it. That's the curse of losing someone like you. You don't just lose a person, You lose a reality you'll never get back. And they'll lie to themselves, tell themselves you were cold, that you changed, that you switched up for no reason. But in the quiet moments, the ones where they can't lie to themselves anymore, they remember the way that your voice used to calm them, the way you'd show up for them without question, the way your love didn't need validation. It was just there, stable, constant, fierce, and that kind of love, it doesn't fade, it doesn't dissolve, it burns. And now it burns in their memory, because you were the kind of person they didn't know how to receive until it was too late. You didn't become the ending because you wanted revenge. You became the ending because you finally chose yourself. And in a world that teaches you to constantly give, even when it's killing you, that's an act of rebellion, of strength, of survival. They weren't used to people choosing peace over their chaos. They weren't ready for someone to say enough and mean it, because they'd gotten away with it before, with other people, with other hearts. They thought you'd be the same, that you'd stay, that you'd tolerate, that your love was just another thing they could consume until it was dry. But you weren't built for that. You weren't made to be a convenience. You were made to matter. And the second you realized you were being treated like an option in a world full of temporary thrills, you closed the door and didn't look back. And that's what makes you dangerous now. You're not heartless. You just know your worth. You don't hate them. You just no longer excuse them. You don't want them back. You just want your peace, and you'll protect it at any cost. You became so still, so grounded, so powerful in your silence that they had no choice but to face the storm they caused, alone. And while they stumble through shallow connections, trying to feel something, anything, you've learned how to build a world where peace isn't conditional, where love starts with you, where your presence is earned, not given out of habit or history. And the irony, they'll talk about loyalty now. They'll say they want something real, but real already came, and they threw it away. Now they'll romanticize the same traits they once took for granted, the loyalty they ran from. They'll crave it, the depth they mocked. They'll drown in its absence, the presence they overlooked. It'll become the standard they hold everyone else to, and no one will measure up, because you can't recreate real. You either cherish it when it shows up, or you lose it forever. So let them talk. Let them pretend. Let them live in their little performance while you live in your truth. Because truth doesn't need to be defended. It stands. Even when no one claps. Even when no one understands. You stood in your truth. You stayed solid when it was easier to fold. You walked away when everything in you wanted to stay. Just one more time. And now Now you're free. Not from them, but from the version of you that kept breaking just to keep other people whole. And that freedom, that's not just an ending, it's a rebirth. And you know what they really hate the most? Not that you left, but that you didn't need them anymore. That after all the damage, all the doubt, all the moments they made you feel small, you still rose. You didn't just walk away. You outgrew them. That's what breaks them in silence. That's what keeps them scrolling through your profile in the dark, wondering how someone they thought was weak enough to beg became strong enough to vanish without explanation. They wanted you broken. They expected you to fold. They built their ego around the idea that you needed them to be whole. But now you're something they can't touch, can't control, can't understand. And you know how that happens? Through pain. Not the kind that's loud and messy, but the kind that's quiet. The kind that teaches you through silence. The kind that doesn't scream. It whispers over and over again. This is not love And it took you a long time to hear it. You kept justifying the red flags, kept calling it loyalty when it was self-neglect, kept believing that maybe if you just loved a little harder, a little deeper, they'd wake up. But you weren't loving them. You were saving them. And they were watching you drown while handing you more weight. That's not love. That's destruction dressed in sweet words. And one day, you stopped calling it love and started calling it what it was, abuse in disguise. That's when everything changed. That's when you started reclaiming yourself, quietly, painfully, piece by shattered piece. You started unlearning the lie that said love has to hurt to be real. You stopped romanticizing the struggle and started choosing yourself even when it felt unnatural. Because self-love, it's not pretty at first. It's lonely. It's awkward. It's walking away from what you wanted most because you finally realized it was killing you. And in that walk away, you found your power. You found the voice they tried to bury, the fire they tried to dim, the strength they thought you'd never use. You didn't just survive losing them, you became untouchable because of it. Now, you move different. Now you smile different. Now your silence isn't empty. It's loaded. It says, I saw everything. I know everything. I just don't care to react anymore. And that's the most terrifying thing to someone who thought they'd always have access to you. When you no longer try to explain, to fix, to chase, to prove. When you let the silence speak for you. It becomes a mirror they can't look into without crumbling. Because it forces them to ask the one question that haunts them. How did I lose someone like that? And the answer is simple. They didn't lose you because you weren't enough. They lost you because they never were. They couldn't meet you at your level, so they tried to bring you down to theirs. And when that didn't work, when you finally refused to lower yourself anymore, they spun the story, played the victim, made you out to be the distant one. But the truth? You weren't distant. You were done. And there's a difference. One is emotional detachment. The other is self-respect. And the moment you chose self-respect, you broke the pattern. So don't doubt yourself now. Don't soften just because the silence feels heavy. Don't go back just because the past feels familiar. The pain you carry isn't a sign that you're heartless. It's a reminder that you had a heart and someone didn't know how to hold it. But now you hold it. Carefully, firmly, with hands that no longer shake for people who don't deserve the weight of your love. You didn't seek closure, because deep down, you always knew it was never coming. And even if it did, it would have been too little, too late. What could they possibly say that would undo the nights you cried yourself to sleep? That would erase the moments you questioned your worth because of their silence? Number, there are wounds words can't fix. There are betrayals no apology can clean. And the strongest thing you ever did wasn't surviving them. It was leaving without needing to be healed by them. Because real healing, it came from within. It came when you stopped hoping they'd come back better. It came when you stopped fantasizing about the apology you deserved. It came when you looked in the mirror and said, even if no one claps for me, I'm proud I made it out. That's what becoming the ending looks like. Not revenge, not anger, peace. A quiet, terrifying kind of peace. The kind that says, I've seen the worst, and I still chose to rise.